Hello, excuse me. Hello, people. Welcome back to another video by your good friend Chad Marco. Make sure you attack, maul, and molest the like button, subscribe, and all that good shit. And let's have a conversation. So, recently Halloween just passed a few days ago. And I kind of went zero dark 30 mode because, out of all the holidays, Halloween is not only my favorite, but I say probably the only one that I really celebrate in my own way. These days I just, probably for like the last 2 or 3 days of October, I just lock myself in my room, get a bunch of candy, and just get real comfy and watch as many horror movies as I can. So that's exactly what I did, and had a pretty good time. But I wanted to actually talk a little bit about the movies that I watched. I watched about 20 movies over the course of that 3-day period. And so what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to basically give like a brief summary of the movies that I watched and then tell you whether or not I recommend it. I don't want this video to be too long, so I'm just going to kind of go from movie to movie. And it's not in any particular order. I think it's in like alphabetical order. But at the very end, I'm going to tell you the best movie I saw over this Halloween, like the most highly recommended movie. So let's get started. So the first movie is Anthropophagus 2. So Anthropophagus is a sequel to a 1980s movie called Anthropophagus, about a man-eating cannibal. Now, if you remember the first horror movie video I put out years ago, talking about like my 10 favorite horror movies, not the recent one, the 10 cult classics, but the one before that I put out years ago, Anthropophagus was up there, I believe. And I really like that movie. I don't like this movie. This was not a very good movie to me. I think it was lacking in some of the finer aspects of the original. The original movie had like solid storytelling and actually put effort into establishing the characters as being like somewhat likable. But this movie was pretty much just gore porn. It was about this group of 7 girls and their professor, and they go to this abandoned, I think like abandoned war bunker in Germany or something like that. And they go there, no cell phones, nobody knows where they are, just completely dumbass shit to get killed. And then they lock themselves in this bunker and they start getting killed one by one. It was very violent though, very, very violent, a lot of gore. I would say the only good scene was probably like towards the end because of how fucked up it was. Other than that, I really would not recommend this. It's the most standard kind of gore porn, murder porn type of horror. So the next one is the Dunwich Horror. This is an older movie from about, I think, 1970 or so. This one, I believe, was about this young man from a wealthy family who was into the occult, and they had a pretty bad reputation where they lived because they would do things like these rituals and shit, trying to, I guess, like summon creatures from another world. And so he goes and to this university and hypnotizes this young girl to help her to get access to the Necronomicon, or the Book of the Dead. And so the movie is basically about him trying to scheme to get this book so he can complete this ritual. Now, this movie, I really didn't like this. Normally I'm into like these old school kind of like slow build up type of horror movies, but I just found this one to be incredibly dull. Would not recommend. So the next one is Hellraiser 22 from the master of horror, Clive Barker. Now this is one that I liked. So if you know anything about Hellraiser is actually a long running horror movie series. I haven't seen half of them. I probably seen like the first 2 and this one. I think I've seen about 4 of them, and there's gotta be at least about 8, 9, 10 of them by now. But you know, the Hellraiser series is about this puzzle box that, when unlocked, it gives the unlocker a prize or a gift of their choosing, which typically it's a puzzle box that attracts like thrill seekers and people that are really into like dark and the occult, seeking like otherworldly pleasures. But the reality is that whoever ends up finding this puzzle box, they don't get what they thought they were going to get. They get a bunch of pain and suffering, right? That's Hellraiser in a nutshell. And this one was about this drug addict girl, this just like recovering drug addict, and her boyfriend. They steal the puzzle box, and basically the way the puzzle box works is that as you're solving the puzzle, these spikes come out and they cut you. And if the spike cuts you, it absorbs your blood, and you're chosen as a sacrifice for whoever is the last one to solve the last part. They get the prize, but you have to sacrifice like 4 or 5 people to be the one that actually gets the quote unquote prize. And so her brother ends up being the one that gets cut by the puzzle box after trying to pick it up, and he gets taken by these Cenobites. So yeah, basically the whole movie is about her trying to get her brother back who was taken by the Cenobites. But as she's trying to do that, more people keep touching the puzzle box and getting taken by the Cenobites. But yeah, this is one that I definitely like. I wasn't expecting it to be as good as it was. I saw that it was pretty it had a decent rating on IMDb, and so I was like, okay, maybe this is gonna be all right. And I thought it was pretty cool. Would recommend. So the next movie is Mimic, which I believe this came out in like the late 90s. So this movie is about there was a outbreak of a virus that affected children, and so the virus was passed along by roaches. And so a woman who was, I forgot the exact name, but it's a person that studies insects. She created a new insect that would hunt roaches. So it was like an insect hybrid. Now, I don't know how the hell they did this, but she basically created a new insect that was designed to hunt roaches. But they were also designed so that, like, as a failsafe, that they would die naturally, and could not reproduce after about, I think it was like a year or something like that. But somehow, you know, these insects, they accomplished the job. They killed the roaches that were spreading the virus, and most of them apparently died. But somehow some of them survived and learned how to reproduce. And so the insects go through a rapid evolution period, I guess you could say, like rapid evolution, where they mutate into like giant insects that can mimic humans somewhat, as far as like their face. It's some weird shit like that. So weird shit, because it's not like they make themselves look like a human. They just have like this mandible claw thing with a man face. That's why it's called Mimic. But yeah, basically it's about giant insects killing people. Now this I thought was not great. I thought it was kind of good. It's a decent watch. I wouldn't like heavily recommend it like as a must watch. But I didn't dislike it at all either. I enjoyed watching it. I just don't really see it as being a must watch, but it was a pretty good movie. So the next movie is Pandorum. I think this movie came out in like 2009 or 10 or something like that. But this is like a futuristic spaceship horror movie. So this movie is about this giant spaceship that sets off on a journey to another planet. I believe the planet was called Tarsus. And they were trying to find another planet for human beings to inhabit because the Earth was becoming gravely overpopulated. By this point in the story, the Earth was about 44 billion years old. No, I mean, my bad. The Earth had 44 billion people on it. God. Okay, no, not years old, but the Earth had 44 billion people on it, which is a lot more than the 7 to 8 billion that we have today. And so they were experiencing great overpopulation, and they found another planet far away. And so they were like, let's put people on the ship and send them there and see if this planet is actually hospitable. And then they would probably send more over time. So the ship had like thousands of people up there. I've got the exact number. Like it was like a lot, like thousand. I forgot, what was it, like 16,000 people or something around there. Most of them in like cryogenic sleep. Then like a few of them actually manning the ship and watching over everything and making sure that everything was fine. But the movie starts off like way late into the trip, and this guy wakes up and he realizes that something isn't right. He wakes up and there's nobody manning the ship. And so he manages to find somebody else, and they start working together to figure out what happened. And then he ends up running into like these creatures that are like going around killing people. And so I'm not gonna spoil the movie, but basically the ship is in complete chaos because there's these creatures that go around killing people. Like anybody that wakes up and starts wandering around, they start killing them. Now, this movie I really like. This was a good movie. I would definitely recommend Pandor. I thought this was a very good movie. It's like an action sci-fi horror film, and it's got like great twist in the movie. Quite a few unexpected twists and turns where the things that you wouldn't really expect to have happened. But this is a good one. Definitely recommend it. So the next one is Pearl, the extraordinary origin story. So Pearl is the prequel to the movie X, which I did a No Singles Allowed movie review for. Like, comment, subscribe. Oh man. And yeah, I enjoyed X. And so I want to go ahead and watch Pearl. So I watched Pearl. So Pearl is about, let me just go ahead and go to the story. Pearl is the prequel story to X. And Pearl is about this young girl who lives on a farm with her overbearing, strict mother and handicapped, disabled father who's wheelchair bound and can't speak or do anything for himself. So they have to, clean his shit and all that great stuff. And so she has dreams of being a superstar. This movie takes place in like 1918, I believe. And she has dreams of being like a superstar, like the girl she sees in the moving pictures, right? She wants to be a dancer and travel the world, but she's been stuck on this farm her whole life. And so the frustration of living on the farm for so long starts to get to her. And then she starts to seek out this life for herself. But when things don't go as planned, she begins to act out very violently. I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, this movie I thought it was good, but it wasn't as good as I thought it would be. I honestly like X better. Pearl wasn't bad, don't get me wrong. I liked it, but it wasn't as good as I thought it would be. And I guess really what it came down to was that there was a lot of build up before the violence and the killing really started, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I think it's kind of, I guess it's difficult to go from X, which was really like from beginning to end, like I'm not gonna say like it started off with like extreme killing from the beginning or anything like that, but I feel like it was just better from beginning to end. Even the parts before the killing really started, I think were better than Pearl, right? But not to say that Pearl was bad in that regard. I just expected more. I guess it's weird to go from X to this, which just doesn't have like that same level of extreme camp level horrorness to it. Horrorness, that a word? Like Pearl to me is really more so leans towards like good storytelling as far as establishing her as a character and letting the viewer know about her past and how she ended up the way that she is. And I think they did a good job of that. But I think the issue for me was that having watched X, I was expecting like X0. But Pearl really is just Pearl. But I would recommend it. I would recommend Pearl and X. So the next movie is Possessor. So this is an interesting movie. Possessor is about this organization that is able to, or has this technology that allows them to transfer the consciousness of one person to another, and they use this technology to commit assassination. So basically what they do is, if there is a high profile target that's hard to reach but they need to assassinate, they get their assassin and transfer their consciousness to somebody that's close to them, someone that they can access. And so once their assassin has taken over this person, they begin to assume that person's life for a short while, all the while setting up an assassination plan to kill said person. And so in this movie, it starts off with like a one assassination, just to kind of show off like what she does and how it works. But then there's like one big assassination that takes place, that takes up most of the movie. And so the basically the assassination, or the plan to assassinate this guy who was like a CEO of a big company, wealthy, real big asshole, wealthy CEO jerk guy. The plan was going just as they thought it would, right? But then a problem occurs when their assassin is unable to leave the person's body and get back to her own body. She was unable to abort and go and remove her consciousness from the body and get back to her body, basically. And so what happens is the host's body ends up regaining control. His will takes back control of the body, while her consciousness becomes dormant or falls back into the subconscious. And so basically this guy, he's been watching himself do these, commit, this horrific assassination. And now he's stuck because everybody's going to start looking for him to arrest him. And so he's trying to figure out what the hell is going on. Why did I commit this murder? I know I wasn't in control. So what the fuck is going on? And that's pretty much what the whole movie is about. Is the guy trying to figure out what's going on, like why did he commit the murder, and having to like access the memories of the assassin that inhabited his body in order to commit the murder. But now this was a very interesting movie. I would recommend it. I thought it was good. One thing that the one thing I didn't like about it was that I wanted to like learn more about the possessor technology, like the technology that allows them to do it in the first place. Like there's so many questions that never really get answered in this movie. Like, how does the technology work? Who is this secretive organization that is setting up these assassinations? Who are they backed by? Like, how deep does the rabbit hole go? And they don't really go into great detail about that. And so the movie does leave you with more questions than answers. But overall, very, very interesting. I would recommend. So the next one is Rape Squad. So Rape Squad is a movie from about, I think, 1974. And it's about this girl who ends up getting raped by a serial rapist. And so she goes to the police and tries to get help to find this guy. Now the police, they aren't much help because the guy goes around in like an orange jumpsuit and a hockey mask. Like, he's very smart and he's good at staying undetected. He's good at not being found. So the police aren't really able to help her. So the girl who gets raped, she manages to connect with other girls who were victims of the same serial rapist. And so they come together and they create the Rape Squad. And their goal is to basically set up this little group where other women who have been sexually assaulted or are having issues with men can come to them, and then they'll come to their rescue to help them. And they're hoping that doing that will allow them to eventually track down the man that raped every single one of them. So this this movie, when I found this movie, I couldn't believe this movie was real. This is one of those movies where I was like, is this like, how can this be real? How can this be real? Like, and I can't say it was a good movie. I can't in good conscience tell you guys it was a good movie, but I will say this. I think, and this might sound fucked up, but I think the scenes where where you see him actually like commit the rapes are very effective, because it's not just he just comes out of nowhere and brutally does, like he takes his time and like humiliates them in like these subtle ways and things like that, like getting them to say things. And it's fucked up. It's a fucked up, like the first part of the movie is honestly disturbing and fucked up because of just like how effectively the rapist is able to make you just dislike him. Right? But then the second, I would say the second half of the movie, it takes a turn in a different direction where the girls are together and they're trying to help out other girls, and it starts to feel like this feminist power trip type of movie where they're like beating up pimps and breaking into guys' houses and destroying their property and stuff. And it gets to a point where it just begins to get kind of goofy. Almost like those black exploitation films of the 1970s. Like it starts off like on a completely serious note, like whoa, dark, and then it takes that turn into like, oh, this the rape squad. But then towards the end, it gets dark again when they finally track the guy down. So I wouldn't say it's a good movie, but it's interesting. It is, because again, it's like I can't believe this movie exists. I would recommend it just because of how fascinating it is that a movie like this is even real. So the next movie is Ringu, The Ring. So The Ring is obviously one of the most popular, famous horror movies, and at this point, horror franchises to come out of Japan. It was made in, I believe, 1997, 1998. And this was my first time watching the Japanese version. Oh yeah, and just side note, all the movies that I watched here, my first time seeing these. Like for Halloween, I always go for movies that I haven't seen yet. I had seen the American version, but I'd never seen the Japanese version. So this was my first time watching the Japanese version of The Ring. And so if you don't know, The Ring is about this tape or this video that comes on late at night, and if you watch it to its completion, you die 7 days later. And so this news reporter, she starts investigating this because I think these teenagers turned up dead soon after having alleged watched the video. And so the rumors of the video and The Ring starts to go around schools and whatnot, so she begins to investigate it. Now of course she's skeptical because you're talking about something very supernatural, so she goes on ahead and she watches the video. I forgot exactly how she got the tape, but she ends up getting a tape with the video and watching it, and she watches the video. But then soon after, I think somebody else dies. And that's when she realizes that it's actually real. And she realized that she fucked up by watching the tape. And so her ex-husband ends up watching the tape, and their son accidentally ends up watching the tape at some point in the movie. So realizing that she's really going to die because of this cursed video, she and her husband or ex-husband begins to try to track down the mystery of this video and the strange girl that appears in it. And so this movie I thought was good and I would recommend it. But what I found interesting about it is that, because I had seen the American version, and I'm not saying it was bad, but the American version to me didn't really sell me on this particular story. I just thought it was kind of like a regular paranormal, like ghost story type of horror movie. I didn't think much of it, but having watched the Japanese version now, I realized, like, okay, this is why this movie was so was so popular at the time. I mean, outside of just the great concept, you know, the whole, oh, if you watch the video, you die 7 days later. You know, I think it's that sort of ghost story type of tale that can actually have people like scared in real life, thinking about how it could happen to them. Kind of like the whole say Candyman 5 times in the mirror, right? It's kind of like that sort of thing, and that I think is very effective. But I think the Japanese version in particular, just like, if I had to really sum up why I think the Japanese version is better, I think the overall journey of trying to uncover the mystery of the girl in the video, because this isn't the type of horror movie with a lot of violence and just crazy shit happening. It's very slow, a lot of dialogue, and it's you know, it's a sort of it's more of an investigative horror movie than just people dying left and right. And I think that particular aspect, oh my bad, my alarm went off. And I think that particular aspect of the movie is just done better. And I think that's why I liked it more. But I would definitely recommend The Ring. So the next movie is Road Games. So this movie came out, I think, in the 1970s. I think, what's the guy's name? What's his name? Stacy Keach. Yeah, Stacy Keach and Jamie Lee Curtis. She was getting around this era, man. I swear she was in like 4 different horror movies, including Halloween. But yeah, this movie is about a truck driver who ends up seeing this guy pick up a hitchhiker. And so he sees him pick up this hitchhiker and doesn't really think much of it. But then the next day, he hears on the radio that there is a serial killer going around killing young female hitchhikers. And so he starts thinking back to all the weird stuff that he saw the guy doing before he had left. Like how he was watching the black garbage bags before they were getting picked up by the trash man during the morning. And he was like, wait a minute, basically he was like, what if he had killed the girl and chopped her up and put her in the bags? But he's like, you know, I'm overthinking it, whatever. But he starts seeing more and more weird stuff, because the thing is, remember, he's a truck driver. And so him and this guy who he thinks is a serial killer are on the same path going to the same location. So they're on this long road trying to get somewhere. And all the while, this guy is seeing more and more evidence that this person might be a serial killer. And that's pretty much what the movie is about. You know, the sort of it's almost like a cat and mouse type of thriller / horror movie, where this guy is kind of trying, like, he's not 100% sure, but as it goes along, he just starts seeing more and more evidence that this guy might be the serial killer that the police are looking for. Now, going into this movie, I gotta say, I thought it would be better than it was. I think it was a great concept. I think the actors did a really good job. I really love the main character's performance. What's his name? Stacy Keach. I think he did a great job playing that character. And I love the cinematography in this movie. It's filmed so well. But I gotta say, I think the big flaw with this movie is that it's almost too lighthearted at times. It starts off really good, but then there's just so much of the movie where, like, it's not a comedy horror, but it's just too much goofiness. Like, there's this part in the movie where he picks up this fat lady who got left by her husband, and they're having like this weird, like, funny back and forth where he's annoyed by her and they're playing these little games and shit. Like, it's too much like play in the middle of the movie. And it's like the peak of the movie to me is in the beginning and at the end. But in the middle, it's too lighthearted. And I think if they would have really just made the movie more, like, gave it a more serious tone throughout, it would have really been good to me. But I think because of how lighthearted the middle parts of the movie are. I mean, I'm not saying like the whole middle part is just like sunshine and rainbows and shit, right? It's still some dark shit going on, but not enough to where it feels like a horror movie all throughout. And I think that's the problem with this movie. If they would have really sunk their teeth into the horror aspect of what this movie could have been, then I think it would have been better. But as it stands, I can't really recommend it because of that. So the next movie is Screams of a Winter Night. So this movie, what was this? Okay, yeah, this is about a group of friends. They go out on a vacation to a cabin in the woods, of course. And they start telling each other scary stories one at a time. And so they're about, basically, it's a horror movie anthology with different horror stories, right? Really can't recommend this movie because it's a bad horror movie. And even the stories that they tell aren't really particularly scary, I don't think. There was one that I thought was okay. But you know, in a weird way, I did kind of like this movie. And I know that sounds crazy because I can't really recommend it. And it is bad, but it's a very like comfy type of horror movie where it's long and you got the group of friends and they're just huddled up together in the cabin in the woods, and you see the different interactions with each other and telling the stories. Like, it's really just, to me, it's not good, but it's a comfy old horror movie that you can just put on and go to sleep to. I can't recommend it on the merit of being good because it's not. But if you're into like putting on old horror movies to sleep to, Screams of a Winter Night is one of the best. So the next movie is Session 9. So this movie is about this group of, I think they're like contractors, and they do work where they clean out old, abandoned, dilapidated buildings to get them ready for use. And so it's like a small team of guys, and they're all like working on this building on a contract to fix it up and get it ready, right? And so, obviously, when you're talking about, I think it was like the building they're fixing up was like it was an old insane asylum or something like that, right? And so, obviously, when you're talking about cleaning up an abandoned insane asylum, you're talking about like ghosts, right? Like ghosts and hauntings and shit like that. But quite frankly, you know, this movie, it doesn't really have a lot of like supernatural or paranormal elements to it. I mean, it's there, but it's more like subtle. I think the bulk of this movie, as far as the appeal of it to me, was just in the character interactions. I think the dialogue was written very well. And just seeing how the characters interacted with each other, like the different dramas that went on between the men, and slowly learning more about them and their past and how they know each other and their tendencies and whatnot. Like, it's more of like a psychological thriller than a straight up horror movie. I think the horror stuff doesn't really happen till towards the end. But to be honest, I can't really say that I particularly liked it as a whole. Because again, it didn't feel like a horror movie until about the end of it. Like the first, like most of the movie just felt like more of a drama thriller type of movie. And the real dark shit didn't happen until the end. Like there's like one scene in the middle, but that's about it. Can't really recommend it because to me it's barely a horror movie. So this movie is Shriek of the Mutilated. So this is an older movie that came out in the 70s, I believe. Now this movie is about a professor and some of his students. They are looking for a Yeti. Why did I pick this to watch? But yeah, they go to this guy's house who lives out in the wilderness, who has apparently spotted a Yeti or some strange creature. And so they go there looking for it. And so the movie is about them trying to hunt down the Yeti, or, you know, maybe capture it alive to get evidence of its existence. And of course, they start dying one by one as they're trying to do this. Now, the plot sounds very simple, but it actually takes a very interesting turn later on in the movie. But that being said, this was probably one of the worst movies I watched, like the whole Halloween. I did not like this movie. It was not good. There is a pretty significant twist though, but this, I gotta say, pass on this. Wouldn't recommend it at all. So the next movie is The Terrifier. So the Terrifier is a very violent, gory horror movie, man. Like this movie is just pure horror and gore, very little plot. I mean, I'm looking at the quotes here from the reviews, and it says things like dares to go where few films would even consider. True. Makes Pennywise look like Krusty. True. Up there with Freddy, Jason, and Jigsaw. True. Like, right? Like, and I think the thing about the Terrifier is that it has the violence and the gore and the brutality of any horror movie you could possibly name. Like it's up there with the guys of the Mount Rushmore of violent, brutal horror movies. But I think at the same time, when you're talking about Terrifier 1 in particular, it really is, quite frankly, it's murder porn. It's horror without really any sort of significant or good storytelling to speak of. Cause it's like you could look at a movie like, and just going back looking at some of the classics, right? Like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Halloween, and Friday the 13th. Yeah, those movies are known as being like violent, a lot of killing and things like that, especially as the sequels come out. But those movies have a foundation of solid storytelling and characters that were able to stand the test of times because of the storytelling and the plot surrounding them. You know, like Jason, for instance, he isn't just some killer going around killing shit. You know, there's the backstory of him being this deformed kid that drowned at Camp Crystal Lake because the camp counselors were not paying attention, and so that's why he came back as this rage zombie Terminator Spectre. Right? And so there's like a background to it, and Terrifier just doesn't have that. Terrifier is really just a murderous clown going around killing people. I don't know, maybe at some point in one of the sequels they'll flesh him out more as far as who he is and why he does what he does, but Terrifier is the very definition of horror movie murder porn, and I definitely recommend it if you're into that sort of stuff. I say all that, I don't mean that to try to put it down, right? I'm just speaking on what it lacks. But as far as gory murder porn, Terrifier is one of the best of his time. So the next movie is The Dead Pit. So this movie is about it was about this mental hospital or insane asylum that was run by this crazy mad head doctor who would run these experiments on his patients, trying to, I guess you could say, like, solve their mental illness, but I doubt that was really the case, considering he was just butchering them and shit. But anyway, the doctor that was under him got tired of him committing these murders, and so he killed him and then locked him away in the deepest depths of the mental hospital. And then he takes over. And so years later, this girl shows up, and she has amnesia. And soon after, the part of the mental hospital where the old murderous head doctor was killed begins to open up. And then the dead patients that he experimented on, they begin to rise from the grave. They come out and start killing people, simply. This was not a good movie. This came out in about, I think, 1989, 1990. Just not a good movie. I mean, I struggled to even explain the plot because it was just stupid. This was a stupid movie. But you know, my thing is, I don't just always go for the obvious good movies that are highly rated. You know, I like to really go off the beaten path, and that's how I find hidden gems sometimes. But this was definitely a stinker. So the next movie is The Depraved. So this movie is about a group of urban explorers who are, I think they're in Germany or something. I forgot exactly where it takes place. I think it's Germany. And they want to explore this Nazi war bunker or something. Kind of like Anthropophagus too. What the hell is up with German war bunkers? But anyway, they want to explore this underground Nazi German war bunker that's been abandoned. And so they go down there with this guy who acts as sort of a tour guide. You know, he's like a liaison to get them down there and to show them around and get them out safely. And so they go down into this bunker and they run into some neo-Nazis, obviously. But that happens and they manage to get away without any sort of like real conflict. So they continue to explore. And then once they're satisfied, they get ready to leave. But while trying to get back, the guy, their liaison that was, you know, showing them around, who got them down there in the first place, he ends up falling down and breaking his leg. And so they go down there to help him. And so two of the group, they stay with him so as to not leave him down there by himself, and they send another two to go look for help. Soon after this, a strange man shows up and offers to help them. And long story short, this man turns out to be a serial killer. And he starts killing the fuck out of them. So this is kind of a straightforward serial killer slasher type of movie. It does have a bit of interesting aspects to it because of the whole Nazi theme and the background of the killer. Now, this movie is kind of frustrating to watch because the protagonists, they're just so stupid. The stupid shit they do in this movie is like, it's just completely unforgivable. So it can be a frustrating watch. But overall, I didn't think it was a bad movie. I thought it was a bit generic in terms of like serial killer slasher horror. It really didn't bring anything unique to the table, I would say. But if you have a taste for like serial killer slasher horror, this is something solid. And I think there's one part at the end that is just like, ugh. Like it's worth a watch just for that. I would recommend it, not highly, but if you just want a very depressing moment, then there you go. The Depraved is for you. So the next movie is Train to Busan. So Train to Busan is actually a South Korean zombie movie. And I think it came out a few years ago, like 2016. And it's about this man who is I forgot exactly what his job is, but he works for like this big company, and he works very hard, and his life is essentially consumed by his job and his work to the point where he neglects his daughter. And so it's his daughter's birthday coming up, and she wants to go visit her mother. Now, the man and his wife, they are separated. I don't think they were divorced, but they're separated. And so he wants to go ahead and take his daughter to go see her mother. So they get on the train to Busan. I guess that's how you pronounce it. But as all this is happening, there is a zombie outbreak in South Korea, in their area. I forgot exactly how it started. I think it's like a chemical spill or something like that ends up getting into people, and then they turn into murderous zombies, and then they start attacking people and spreading. It's basically typical zombie shit, right? And so the movie is basically about this man and his daughter, along with other passengers of the train that they're on, trying to survive a zombie outbreak and trying to make it to Busan, which is apparently one of the few safe locations left in South Korea. Now, this movie was very good. This is definitely a good zombie movie. Probably one of the best zombie movies I've seen in a while. The whole zombie subgenre of horror is it's so oversaturated at this point. I mean, calling it oversaturated is an understatement. You have so many trashy, straight to streaming, straight to the damn garbage can level zombie movies that come out. And I think it's gotten to the point for me where I've kind of lost hope in good zombie movies coming out. Since the high point, of movies like Dawn of the Dead. And so Train to Busan for me was very refreshing because I haven't seen a good horror movie in a while. I mean a good zombie horror movie in a while. And this movie was very good. I thought it has like great action. Like once it gets started, it pretty much doesn't stop. Like it's a very like frantic, hectic kind of movie where everything is moving so fast and they're all struggling to survive, and like there's just this sense of like them having to go against overwhelmingly impossible odds, and like every inch forward for the group just feels like it's like they just barely make it by the skin of their teeth every time, and survivors are like dying left and right all throughout the movie. But I think one thing about this movie I will say that separates it, I think this movie did a very good job of making you like the characters. The main characters are very likable, and they all have like their own unique personality and the way they interact with each other and then have to work with each other. And I gotta be honest, there were a few times in this movie where I didn't cry, but I felt myself tearing up a few times in this movie. This movie, like I did not expect this, but this movie has some surprisingly touching moments, especially like in the middle and towards the end. This movie, it makes you, it hits you in the feels. It definitely hits you in the feels. I teared up a few times. I managed to not all out cry, but I did tear up a few times watching this movie. Highly recommended. One of the most highly recommended movies that I would select from this list. So the next movie is VHS 85. So if anybody doesn't know about the VHS series, I think this might be the 5th VHS movie or the 6th. I don't really remember. There's quite a few. I think there's like 5 or 6 of them, but I think this is the newest one. So VHS is a horror film or a horror anthology movie series that is typically about like the whole theme of it is these horrific or horror stories that are caught on like home video and stuff like that. And this one is all about tapes that came out of like 1985. And so you have different stories. Like one story is about these people who get killed while on vacation, but anyone that touched the water in the lake come back as not zombies, but basically they can't die. And so they want to go and hunt down whoever it was that killed them. There's another story about what was it? A story about this kid who had dreams or could see a killer going around killing people in his dreams, and then they would show up on this like video recorder that he had, and then he would mail those tapes to the police so that they could find the killer. So again, it's like I think it's like 4 or 5 stories throughout the movie. Now, one thing about VHS too, though, is that not only are there, now this is kind of typical of horror anthologies, right? But you have the individual stories, but there's also a main story that is happening throughout the entire movie. So between the individual stories, you will see like the next scene of like the main story, and then there'll be like a climax to it all at the end of the movie. So that's basically the whole theme of VHS. But I thought this was good. It wasn't amazing by any means, but I think the VHS series is very solid. You know, in a world where we have a lot of horror junk, a lot of horror garbage, quite frankly, I think VHS has been a dependable, reliable horror movie film series where whenever I choose to watch the latest VHS movie, because I think this is like the 3rd or 4th one I've seen, I'm never disappointed. I'm not saying it like it's great, but it's a solid pick for any Halloween, right? Maybe not as the main dish, but a great appetizer every time. I would recommend it. So what was the best movie out of all the movies I watched for Halloween? What was the best one to stand out? I gotta give it to Terrifier 2. Terrifier 2 was the standout best movie of my Halloween. And you know what's interesting? Halloween night, I think I watched Road Games, VHS 85, Pearl, then Terrifier 2, in that order. And I watched Pearl around like midnight-ish, because I thought Pearl was gonna be like the big, right, the big standout horror movie that was gonna be the most memorable, best movie of the night. And Pearl was just like good, but Terrifier 2 was great. Undoubtedly the best movie that I watched Halloween night. Now you remember before when I talked about Terrifier 1, I talked about how it didn't really have a significant plot to it. It was just, quite frankly, murder porn, right? And there wasn't a lot of like build up and establishing a story with likable characters. it was just some good fucked up horror movie killing, right? But with Terrifier 2, you could tell that they put more of an emphasis on storytelling and wanting to, you know, build up the main characters a bit so that you can actually care about them and things like that. And the movie is actually like 2 hours long. It's a long movie. It's a long movie. In fact, I thought the movie is 2 hours and 18 minutes long. It's long. And I would say out of the whole movie, there was only one scene I didn't like. There's like this dream sequence scene like early in the movie that to me lasts way too long. If that scene, that little dream sequence, which is like it's built like a little television set where the Terrifier clown or Art the Clown is like a Mr. Rogers of sorts. So just some goofy shit. That scene was way too long. If they cut that by like 2/3, the movie would have been perfect. That was the only blemish on the whole movie. I hated that scene. It was just way too long. But other than that, the movie was just, it was good. And they spent quite a bit of time actually building up to the horror this time. So now you had some story and plot to go along with the brutality and the extreme violence of the movie. And when I say extreme violence, I mean, there's one scene in this movie, there's one kill where he kills this girl in her house. And I'm not going to go into it, but it is the most violent, brutal horror movie kill I've ever seen. In particular because of just how drawn out it is. It's like just a long, torturous murder scene that, I mean, it puts Leatherface to shame. You know, Leatherface love to tie you up and play with you and shit. Nah, man, like that, I mean, that scene was just, I was in awe. And you know, I love horror. I love horror movies. I've seen everything from the good, the bad, and the ugly. I've seen some fucked up shit. I seek the fucked up shit. And that scene, to me, out of everything I've seen in horror movies ever, that was the most brutal, violent murder scene in a horror movie I've ever seen in my life. Like, traumatizing shit. Never show this movie to children. Don't show it to your mom. Like, oh my god, this movie is just it's crazy. And yeah, I mean, what can I say? It's this movie embodies not just what a horror movie or rather a slasher horror movie is supposed to be, but it embodies the spirit of Halloween. And that's why this movie is my Halloween pick of the year, Terrifier 2, because out of all the movies I watched, like, then I saw some good ones, you know, what I recommend and what I don't. But the difference is that to me, when I watched Terrifier 2, I really felt like it was Halloween when I was watching. Like, this is a Halloween slasher horror movie to the absolute fullest. I mean, if you have a Halloween setup, like a Halloween party, or you want to watch a movie with your girlfriend or your boyfriend or your family, well, maybe not your family, right? No kids. Like, this is the perfect pick. This is it right here, man. I gotta say. But yeah, those were the horror movies that I watched for Halloween. Hope you guys enjoyed that video, and I will see you on the next. So, Johnny.